What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Terp Trends, where I'm joined by a true trailblazer in the world of plant medicine and integrative healthcare, Stephanie Karzon Abrams, a neuropharmacologist and the founder of Beyond Consulting, a firm that provides science, research, and strategic solutions to companies and clinics in the natural product, psychedelic, and wellness spaces. Stephanie's work lives at the intersection of hard science and holistic healing. She's not only a researcher and strategist, but also a prescriber for MDMA and psilocybin therapy under Canada's Special Access Program. And she's also a scientific advisor to the Microdosing Collective, all part of her mission to legitimize and advance emerging therapies. Her passion goes far beyond the lab. She's a fierce advocate for women's health, public education, and the healing power of music and community. From her roots in rigorous pharmaceutical research to her work shaping and future psychedelics and the plant-based healing, Stephanie brings a rare combination of scientific precision and soulful vision. We've honored to have her on the show. Let's dive in.
I'm on the West Coast. I'm in Southern California, a little beach town called Ventura, just south of Santa Barbara. But originally from Montreal, so made the move across.
Made the move. Well, we welcome you, of course. And I know I gave a little intro, and it may be difficult, but if you could you dig into yourself a little more and kind of bring to light what we're doing and what you're doing?
Sure. So you said it, I studied neuropharmacology. So for those who don't know what that is, because it's often confused with pharmacy. So pharmacology is essentially the science of studying what drugs do to the body and what the body does to drugs. So I started in that space, but got really interested in the brain. So really looking at different neurological disorders and all of the different pharmacological treatments and drugs used for things like head injury, concussion, headache, spine injury. Along the way, I got very interested in women's health. So I started in the ICU working with patients who had traumatic brain injury, and I saw how brain trauma didn't just affect people's memory and motor skills. It completely changed who they were and dimmed their light. And I noticed that with time, these patients were still on the same drugs and they were essentially symptom managing. And brain injuries don't target any specific type of population. You can be a child, you can be a mom, a hockey player, you can really be anyone. We're not immune. And unfortunately, it could really, the repercussions, I guess, from the injury could really last a lifetime. I became really invested in finding therapies that could bring people back to themselves and not just mask their symptoms. And that's what led me to psychedelics. And it led me to plant medicine. I wanted to know if there were more curative solutions for these people. I had my own experiences with plant medicines and, was really inspired and moved and just saw the possibilities. And I think a lot of people in this space become inspired by how plant medicine or a psychedelic. And I differentiate the two because you can have plant medicines that are psychedelic, but you could also have psychedelics that are not plants. You have synthetic ones. But people tend to have experiences that are really profound and it inspires them. And it's very often that you hear someone say I had a massive mushroom journey and I wanted to dedicate my life and be of service, to this space. And a little bit of that happened. It just happened that I also had this background in pharmacology and I felt like I could leverage it. Over the years, I stepped into roles that essentially bridge science with spirit. I work with the plant medicines. I work with psychedelic companies to build safer and smarter solutions from research to clinical protocols. My clients are really diverse. It could be a clinic, it could be a retreat center, but it could also be a botanical brand that's looking to invest in research and use that research to establish safety and demonstrate efficacy because the market is becoming so saturated with so many products, not just cannabis and CBD, but functional mushrooms and adaptogenic plants. And Everybody has a new supplement all the time. And one, how do you know that you're getting what the package says you're getting? How do you know about the quality? How do you know about the safety? It's in a completely unregulated space. The FDA doesn't really regulate this space. So we're not a marketing agency. We will offer real science, solutions and research solutions that companies can essentially leverage to build that trust. And you can start with something as small as like a research survey to something as big as a full-blown clinical trial. Um, and yeah, that's a little bit about what I do. There's more, but I guess we'll
Oh
get
yeah.
into it as we
Oh,
chat.
we'll
Yeah,
definitely get into it because
yeah.
you have a lot and you've done a lot and you're involved in a lot. And I think before we can dig into all that, it's be really cool to kind of get a bigger picture of what formed all of this. So in your earlier days, did you always have this influence towards medicine and like psychology and pharmacology, or was there anything that influenced you personal just to get into that field?
I was the kid that wanted to do all of it, like the sports, the arts, the music, the science. I loved it all. And I think, like, education and career wise, I thought, I really wanted to become a doctor. Like, that was just like anyone asked me when I was 12, what do you want to be? And I was like, I want to be a doctor. But, like, low key, I wanted to become a singer. I just didn't tell people that.
Yeah, yeah,
But I was always that, like arty, sciencey kid, kind of hard to choose what I wanted. But I pursued science ultimately. And even when I was pursuing science, I changed my mind a bunch. I have a degree in neurolinguistics because I thought I wanted to be a speech language pathologist at one point.
nice. Yeah,
Um, and I love language. I speak a few languages, and I'm always fascinated by language. And so I thought that would be a really amazing career. And then I found myself in pharmaceutical sciences. What remained was my fascination with the brain. And
yes,
I guess at its core, like I play instruments, I sing, and I always think about like how that is a language and how like the brain is processing that information. So I think like again, at the core, the brain has always just been this deep fascination. And so I've always just wanted to pull it into everything that I was doing. And so that's why when I went into pharmacology, I decided to focus on neuroscience and neurology. Couple things were catalyzing for me. So, like I mentioned, my experience in the ICU and just
yeah,
seeing how the solutions that we had for patients um, just weren't adequate in the long term. As a woman, women change so much through life. We have all these different transitions. We're kind of, I don't I don't want to say this is like it feels like we're at the mercy of our hormones sometimes, but I think what's happening now is this like reawakening, and we're trying to empower women to not be at the mercy of their hormones and learn about their bodies so that we can move forward with more agency. So just like many women out there, I experienced like difficult transitions through puberty and even like later on in life, and I didn't want another pharmaceutical.
yeah,
The answer to women most of the time in their late, in their 20s or 30s is birth control. It's like go on a different birth control or try birth control to like regulate whatever's going on. And I didn't want to do that. And so I actually turned to plants and traditional Chinese medicine herbs.
wow,
And
okay,
I was super reluctant. I was like, I don't know if this is actually going to work. But it did. It was such a simple blend of things like licorice root and ginseng and mint and ginger and poria, which is a type of mushroom. It's all blended together. And I was looking at the package and I was like, how is this going to help me? But it totally did. And it reminded me, I think, in that moment, because I had my own experience that, plants are the original medicine.
yes,
And,
yes,
and of course, we've, innovated and we've done incredible things with modern medicine, but sometimes we can actually go back to the basic plant because the plant in its simplest form can be incredibly powerful. So
yeah,
that was a huge reminder for me. And it was, yeah, it was part of this like aha moment of like, if I didn't receive that education from this like functional medicine specialist, if I didn't go the extra mile to find other solutions, would I have ever figured this out? The information really isn't at our fingertips. Now it's starting to be. I've noticed like this revolution where women are seeking this information and
yeah,
other women are trying to provide it. So I wanted to kind of become one of those voices to like tell the story, to come from a place of, you know, good data and like evidence-based solutions and be able to share that, whether it is in neuroscience or in women's health. So that's kind of how all of this came together. And yeah, I started doing research. I joined a research team. I started advising small companies here and there, advising a nonprofit called the Microdosing Collective, and everything snowballed to a point where I was like, I don't need to be hired. I don't need to be
Yeah.
hired by a psychedelic biotech in this moment. Who knows what the future holds? But that's what I was seeking at the time. I was like, oh, I can go become a pharmacologist for a psychedelic biotech. I was like, I don't need to do that right now. I think that I can just leverage all of this experience. I can keep learning and just serve this entire space with a consulting firm. And that's the kind of a long story, but that's how Beyond Consulting came about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So before we get, two things stuck out to me there. And the first one is you're in the ICU and you're learning about treating these symptoms, or you kind of just dug into that. So does that tie into the kind of, and tell me if I'm wrong, I'm not very educated on it, but I read a lot about the single molecule theory or the one molecule theory that we approach with medicine now. Does that tie into anything that you're kind of talking about?
Does that mean like we look at symptoms as like
And just
isolated
treat it,
problems?
yeah,
Yeah.
rather than trying to like dig into the evidence of why or what.
Yes and no. I have to say that the team that I worked with in the ICU was incredible. It was IC like intensivists, so these are like ICU doctors, neurologists, pharmacists specialized in this field, and
Yeah.
psychologists, and they formed a really integrative team, and they were really trying to look at the whole person. That was actually the first time that I worked within a team that had an integrative approach like that. And I really had a deep appreciation for how they saw the mind and the body as one. Like the neurologists, the brain doctors are talking to the psychologists, the mind doctors, if you will,
Wow.
and they're trying to meet each other in the middle. Like traditionally, they're not talking to each other. So
No.
no, they're just like, the mind, brain not connected. And, some will even say like the mind and the body not connected. But obviously evidence is showing more and more now that the mind and the body are completely intertwined. So I had an appreciation for that. Despite that, there were limitations. Like if you're coming to the ICU with a traumatic brain injury, you're in bad shape. So
Yeah.
we have to treat your symptoms. You're in what we call an acute phase of your injury. We don't have a choice but to mitigate your symptoms. The problem was later. The same types of meds were still being prescribed. So you can be 6 months, a year, 5 year plus out from your head injury, still have insomnia, irritability, sensitivity, sound and light,
Yeah.
depression, anxiety, suffering from the PTSD from the trauma that might have caused the accident that led to the head injury. How are we getting down to the root cause of that? And that's not by prescribing antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications, sedatives to make you sleep, stimulants to keep you up. Like that's not the solution. So that is really what got me interested, is like, how do we really help people find more of a cure, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's not just like the physical felt symptoms, it's also the existential psycho-emotional piece of having a head injury. It impacts your lifestyle and your quality of life. People have brain fog. They feel like they're not productive. They feel like they can't do their jobs. If they have insomnia, they can't show up for their kids' basketball practice.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh my God, I can't be a good parent. I'm at the mercy of this injury. So I became interested in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then even on top of that, the stuff that they probably prescribe to help you feel human again, it probably works against you in the long run to get to that solution.
Yeah. I'm
From
not
what
about
what
like
I've seen,
totally. Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. And I feel like some of these Western conventional medicines definitely have their place. There are plenty of people who are on mental health medication and it's extremely helpful to them. And
Yeah.
I'm not the one who's going to say, replace all of your prescription drugs with plants and
No.
psychedelics. Like that's
No.
not the message at all. If
Yes.
that's working for you, amazing. But what about all the other people who aren't finding relief and
Yes.
it's not working for them? So we just need more solutions. And I feel like that's where plant medicine and psychedelics and the therapies and the research are offering those potential solutions.
Yeah. And I'm
Yeah.
excited to dig into the psychedelic aspect of it because that's a big advocate that I believe in, the power of that. But another topic, and if it's too personal, I don't think it will be, but you said how you're dealing with these things using Chinese medicines and different herbs. So
Mhm.
for other women listeners, you said the herbs, but how did you use them? When did you use them? How did you find relief in that? And maybe that helps some other users as well deal with what they're doing. Because I know
Yeah.
getting off of birth control, I have two older sisters, and I've been surrounded by a bunch of cousins, girl cousins, females, my whole life. And I know getting off of the birth control, from what I've learned, can do a lot to the hormone system, rebooting it and trying to get back into its natural phases. Which
Mhm.
as a guy, like, we should be more educated, but I'm just not. We're just not. So it's interesting, and we should learn more to appreciate more for what is going on. Um, if you could give any guidance into that,
Yeah.
I think we would all benefit from it. And
Well, I can
gentlemen,
tell
keep
you
an
have
open mind.
sisters.
Listen to this stuff, all right? It is
I,
important.
it is important. If you're in a relationship with a woman, I think being able to be more empathetic to the situation is always helpful. But just the fact that you asked this question, like, really demonstrates to me that you grew up with sisters, because I mean, yeah, there's a built-in sensitivity, I think,
Of course,
that you
of
have.
course.
So for me, what I was experiencing was just very irregular PMS, so
Okay.
premenstrual syndrome or symptoms. I was having like weird acne flare-ups. I had a lot of gastrointestinal discomfort, a lot of bloating. I was getting regular headaches, and it was all cyclical, right? So it was just like every month it would come on at the same time. And it'd be one thing if I always kind of had this, but it sprung out of nowhere. And I feel
Okay.
like this is a story that a lot of women can attest to. It's like things are going great, and then all of a sudden you just develop a new symptom or a new bag of symptoms, or like something that you were using and like birth control has been working. It's been working for so many years, and all of a sudden it's just not working for you anymore. I've heard this from so many women. So I didn't want to mess with my birth control at the time, because I thought, like, here's something that was like working for me. I didn't want to like switch. It just felt like a bigger headache. So I wanted to work with what I had. And so I always forget the name of this supplement. And you know what? I should just like have it on my desk when I'm doing a podcast. You know what? Like, can you just
Hey,
let me
yeah,
do a
take it.
quick
Yeah, go
little
do your thing.
Google?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, it's called Jai Wei Xiao Yao Sun. And we're gonna put it in the show notes, okay?
Yeah, you got it.
You see why I forget? You see
Yep,
why I always forget about it? Because it's such
yep.
a long name. But like I was saying earlier, it's not a blend of anything crazy. It's like these very supportive herbs. But together, I guess they're very powerful. They will help regulate your cycle. They're debloating because there's a diuretic in there, like a natural diuretic.
Yeah,
Ginger is anti-inflammatory. You've got licorice root. Dong Quai, which is female ginseng, has a huge role in traditional Chinese medicine for women, not just around like menstruation, but also perimenopause and hot flashes and all the symptoms, the wonderful symptoms that go with that phase of life. But yeah, that was my experience. I started taking this supplement, and all of a sudden everything was regulated.
wow.
And I felt really good about the fact that it was natural. It doesn't always have to be natural, but in this case it was, and
Yeah,
I was really excited about that. And it led me down a rabbit hole of looking at like, what other, plants can be supportive. And I understand that, cannabis is not federally available, right?
yeah,
Psilocybin or other, psychedelic plant medicines aren't always available. So I wanted to know what was, and that way I could educate other women. So I discovered kanna, which is a South African plant,
yeah.
which is Kanna. Has a long, long history of use with the Khoisan people in South Africa,
Hmm.
and it's a mood stabilizer. It does so
I
much
know
more than
about
that.
that.
You know
Yeah,
it? Yeah,
I've
I
I've
love
been to
it.
South Africa.
Okay, cool,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
cool.
yeah. I know about it. Yeah, cool, cool.
Have you tried it?
I haven't, but
Okay,
I've heard talk about it.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, there are quite a few brands here now in the States that are working with the South Africans to create products,
nice,
ethically sourced products, and essentially like spread the education that there's a very supportive plant that can support you through mood shift, to support a woman through her PMS. If you're postpartum and you need a little bit of a boost, you want to take something that's not addictive or neurotoxic and safe for you and baby. Kanna is something that you can use if you want to build more ritual and intimacy with your partner. Kanna could be amazing. So I feel like it's a magical little plant, and that's one
Yeah.
that I discovered.
And can we grow that
And
here, or can it be, what's the growing conditions? Do you know?
yeah, I think,
Are there restrictions on it?
California, yeah, I'm not exactly sure about
So weird,
restrictions.
right?
I know people can like pot it. You can pot it and plant it. Will it survive in California? It
Okay.
can.
Yeah.
You got to think about South Africa.
Yeah. So I was thinking,
If you can be in that type of climate, you could probably grow it. But I don't know when it comes to like regulation and policy around just growing it or just like establishing some sort of like Kana farm.
yeah,
That I have no idea. Um, I feel like if it was really easy to do, it would already be
be
happening.
booming. Yeah. Yeah. Or it's
Yeah,
just not picked up yet. You never know.
maybe.
Sometimes people like to keep these things
Um,
under wraps.
yeah, that's true. There are two companies that I really, really love. One is called Kana Extract Co. They work with the straight Kana extract. My favorite is this extract powder that you can just, put in your mouth sublingually. It tastes a little sweet, a little bitter, but that way I feel like you really feel almost like this like euphoric lift.
Really? And is that how
Yeah,
you
yeah.
consume it, sublingually, or is it more of like a tea or something like that?
You can do tea. You can do sublingual, like the powder extract. You can do a tincture.
Okay.
There's
Yeah.
another company called Ka, exclamation mark is how they have it. And they have a blend and they have chews, like little gummy chews, and they have a tincture. And then there's Fungi. They also have a Kana product. And all three of these brands are doing an amazing job. They all kind of have a different I guess like message around their product. Like for example, a lot of people are steering away from alcohol in
Yeah.
social settings, right? And they're
Yeah.
looking for alternatives, things that make them feel more dropped in, more in their bodies, but also gives them a little bit of a social lubricant. People are using Kana. There are
Nice.
beverages, you can do the tincture, you can do a chocolate. And I love to see that. I think that's awesome. And I also think that cannabis can do that too. Like for me, a sativa makes me super social and funny, and I'm social and funny without the cannabis, but
Yeah.
the
You
cannabis
seem
makes me,
naturally outgoing.
yeah, but it sometimes you just want a little something.
I get it. That's what I use it for. It's my something crutch. It's nice, but I don't drink.
Yeah.
So it makes it
Yeah, I don't really drink
easier
either.
to use that in my social vice. And why I need it, I'm not sure, but it does make it a little funner.
You probably don't need it. You probably just enjoy it. I don't feel like I need it. I just really enjoy it. And
Yeah.
I love the act of like just like smoking a joint with some friends and shooting the shit. And
Yep.
cannabis is deep. Like I end up having some really beautiful conversations. So I love seeing this movement actually away from alcohol, but into this other realm of plants. Like I think that's really, really cool.
Yeah.
And people are becoming more educated. It's not just about having a mocktail that tastes like, a cocktail that's full of sugar. It's like, let me have this adaptogenic beverage that is actually good for me, good for my brain, and is
Yeah.
providing, a little bit of a social lubricant at the same
Yeah.
time. I think that's really cool.
No, I think it's great, and it gets people out of their comfort zone more. Especially with the drinks, it looks like you have something in your hand. You don't feel weird. Because I will say it is weird when you go to a setting, and again, maybe this is only mental, but if, like a corporate setting or something like that, where everybody is drinking, the company has an open bar, and if you're like, oh no, I don't drink, I don't want a beer, I just have a water, like it creates a weird thing, which I don't think should be.
It's so
Not
annoying.
drinking shouldn't be the acceptance for alcohol. I think there's a really big misconception and a really big, um, it shouldn't be as accepted as it is in this society. And I think if we didn't use that as the main crutch, we would be able to progress in a way that we should. But it's challenging with that being the main thing that people are going to. But we won't attack that. We'll dig into something more positive. And So clearly with what you do and working with plant medicine, especially when it comes to prescribing certain things, you have to work under certain parameters, I'm guessing. So what is it like, one, getting into this field and chasing that, and then two, navigating that landscape of restrictions of the medicines that we already have and what people are used to?
Yeah,
I'm sure
that's
it's
a big question.
difficult getting people to
It
be
is.
more open to this. I mean, I'm sure that people come to you because they are already open, but we're also trying to destigmatize something else. Um, and that's always hard to navigate. Uh, what's that like? How's it going?
Yeah, and I mean, to kind of build on what we were talking about before, if like we were able to socially, as an entire globe, get behind alcohol and accept that being drunk and being in an altered state under alcohol is okay, then we just have a lot of work to do because there are a lot of big, powerful naysayers out there. But I don't see why we can't get to a place where we can be globally more okay with botanicals, plants, and psychedelics. I just think we need more understanding. You know, like there's a lot of work to do, and I think that when we're in it, we see the mountain in front of us, and we're kind of like, okay, like this is the mountain we have to climb. And we get really excited because in our little bubble of other professionals in the industry, it's like an echo chamber and we're all just like cheering each other on. But then you step out of the bubble, you know, like I went to give a talk in Orange County here in California for one of the UC systems about women's health and the research being done in psychedelics. And very few people in the room were aware um, about all of it. Like they, you
Okay,
know,
wow.
I did like a show of hands. I was like, all right, who has heard of psychedelics as a therapy, as a medicine? Who has heard of microdosing? You know, and I thought the microdosing was going to
Would
get them
be,
because,
yeah, especially in California, I
yeah,
think a little more than
I
over
know. I
here,
was
you know?
surprised. I was
Interesting.
surprised. Really surprised. I didn't, maybe there was a reluctancy to like show hands, but at the end of the day, there were maybe, you know, 200 people in the room and very
All
few
different
raised
ages?
their hands. All different ages, a
Yeah.
little older, a little bit on the older side. Like I think the majority was 40 plus,
Okay.
50 plus,
Yeah.
but there was still a good mix.
Yeah.
But it just goes to show that like part of this mission is also educating the people outside the bubble. So I try really hard to have these conversations with people who aren't in our echo chamber. I want to go to the UC systems. I want to go to the medical professionals that don't incorporate, you know, psychedelic therapies or plant medicine in their everyday practice, and to show them the research. And if I can be that liaison or that, you know, science communicator, then I feel like I'm accomplishing something, because if we all contribute to that mission, I think we're going to move the needle. We need people to fund research because that research data is what changes policy. I've done like a lobby day in Sacramento, and I saw that just what is going to move the needle is research. People are like,
Yeah.
yes, yes, we believe in it. We see it. We've heard the stories. The veterans are having exceptional,
It's
you know,
amazing.
success,
Yeah.
and I mean all kinds of people, right? But then if you're looking at these communities that are underserved, and you're looking at specific communities of people that are really suffering and that aren't getting the help and the resources that they need, you look at veterans that have suffered and paid for this country
Yeah.
with their blood and their mental health, and their whole lives. And it's like, okay, like if you can start there and you can show promise, then we're on our way. So again, the research is incredibly important. Um, and I personally don't provide any medication, so I'm not a therapist, or I'm not a physician, but I do help clinics and
Yeah.
doctors get their practices and their clinics off the ground. So I'm very much behind the scenes of the patient experience and writing the protocols and ensuring that care is being delivered in a responsible, ethical way. Um, and I think that is really appreciated, and is really important. And I think that running a practice like that is an uphill battle. Like even if you're talking about ketamine therapy,
Yeah.
which is accessible and legal,
Yeah.
It's still an uphill battle. There's no insurance reimbursement for injectable ketamine. There is now for the intranasal J&J
Yep. Yep.
Spravato. It's expensive,
Yeah.
and just because you've got FDA approval for the nasal and you have the ability to do the injectable doesn't mean that people are going to come running. So the responsibility to offer education, to create community, to educate other providers that are going to refer their patients is like number one. Like if you're going to start a practice like that, you really have to put a huge focus on that educational piece. Yeah, I think I kind of deviated from your question, but
No, it was not even a great question. So when I formatted it was way too much anyway, so you navigated that perfectly. I think a great thing to concentrate on is something that I see is we were talking about the psychedelics, right? So the mushrooms, and then we're also talking about MDMA and things like that when it comes into these types of treatments. What have you seen? One, why do you think these two compounds are so important? And two, what have you seen from them? Because I know just what it's doing in the veteran scene with PTSD and depression and bringing these souls back to these bodies. Um, I get chills just saying that. It's remarkable, especially when you dig into it and you see that
yeah.
life come back within these trials. So yeah, why do you think these two compounds are so important, and what have you been seeing with the treatment using them?
They're completely life altering.
Yeah,
I think what's really impressive, there are many things impressive about psilocybin. One key thing that I noticed when I was doing this pharmacology of psilocybin course was it became very apparent to me that we've evolved with psilocybin. I'm completely convinced that earlier iterations of the human form have been consuming mushrooms. I think animals have consumed mushrooms. We have truly evolved. The pharmacology of it, so like how it interacts with our body and our systems and
yeah,
how our body interacts with it is harmonious. It's harmonious. It takes a lot of psilocybin mushrooms to become ill or intoxicated. I'm not talking about having an upset stomach because that's going to happen. But yeah, it's gonna happen. It can give you like the butterflies, or it can make you feel a little nauseous. But
I
that's
get
not
sick
because
when I eat mushrooms. I have a sensitive stomach in general, but usually if I consume mushrooms, I have an upset stomach.
yeah, and that's common. That's common. There's a lot of there are a lot of serotonin receptors in your digestive system. But hey, you know what that means? It probably means that instead of having to ingest them, digest them, you might prefer a tincture.
Yeah.
A tincture means that it'll be absorbed in the mucous membranes of your mouth,
Yep.
and you'll bypass the whole digestive piece of it. So there's ways around it. But when I talk about like the actual like being intoxicated or like really sick from them, it means like you've taken too much. Like
Oh yeah.
overdosing on mushrooms is like you would have to consume so much. I have heard stories of people ingesting, upwards of 5 grams
Yeah.
because they were either tolerant due to medication or having some sort of psycho-emotional block. And those are kind of, exceptions. And psychologically, that could be a little bit harmful. You could enter a state of persistent psychosis if you have too many, and it might take a long time to come back down. But generally speaking, the profile of the psilocybin mushroom is very safe,
Yeah.
very, very safe.
And you're thinking 5 grams is a big dose?
That's a big dose.
It's a big
That's what we
dose.
call a hero dose.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And most people who seek that hero dose are doing somewhere between 3 or 5, or they're doing 5. And I think another thing that's really impressive is some of these psychedelic medicines, like ketamine, for example, is a
Yeah.
psychedelic-like medicine, right? It's not your classic psychedelic. You need to have repetitive sessions.
Yeah.
Many, many people report that one journey with psilocybin was so
Adequate
impactful
enough.
that, yeah, that it totally set them on a path to healing, whether it was substance use disorders or PTSD or a form of treatment-resistant depression. And a really important application is end of life and palliative care. Like psilocybin is not just, a replacement for another pharmaceutical drug. It is addressing the existential piece of medicine, and people who work in palliation with terminally ill patients, for example, are facing life and death every single day with their patients. And just because someone is nearing the end of their lives doesn't mean that they don't deserve to close that chapter in a beautiful way. So these applications, in my opinion, are just absolutely, fascinating and phenomenal. And MDMA as well. MDMA has a totally different pharmacological mechanism. So psilocybin is what we call a classic psychedelic. It binds to your serotonin receptors like a lock and a key. And then MDMA is a little different. It's not just serotonin. It's this mixture of norepinephrine, dopamine, serotonin, and even oxytocin. So you've got this jazz of neurochemicals. And it's doing so much, especially for people who have this armor, around themselves and their hearts, and are not able to pierce through that and find self-love. But it quiets the ego as well. So couples who aren't able to get past these really, really challenging moments, who are going into therapy and trying MDMA, are coming out with the ability to actually converse and hear each other and listen. And I think if I'm not mistaken, there's a phase 3 clinical trial that just got funded not too long ago by the VA following MDMA's rejection from the FDA. And we're kind of waiting to see what those results are going to be. Everybody knows that MDMA is the solution to PTSD.
Yeah.
We know it. I don't tend to speak in extremes, but I'm just gonna,
I think there's a lot of evidence now of the natural medicines that are producing the results that we want, that aren't mainstreamed yet for some. We don't have that answer, time. I think it's all time, and the right people listening and breaking down false barriers that shouldn't be there. And I think that's progression of humanity as well. But we're, like you said earlier, we're in this, I think it's funny to say some great awakening. That's a lot. That's extreme for someone to hear and take that on. But I think there are more people being more aware of the path, the natural path that is more organic, no pun intended. But it coexists with us. It's how we should operate.
Totally. And it's not just meant for people who have a diagnosis.
No.
I feel that, they're not for everybody. And I think you need to approach them with great reverence and responsibility and guidance. Do your research, and tread carefully. But you don't need to be clinically depressed to experience psilocybin or MDMA or any of these. I think we are all entitled to the expansiveness that these little molecules can bring.
Yeah. And I think it's important for people to also be in touch with their emotions and realize it's okay to feel these things. That's okay. You don't have to shield that. Some of it you do. And if you do feel it to a certain level, to seek organic treatment or natural treatment is going to coexist with you more than it is going to some person and they give you a pill to. And I'm not saying that shouldn't be there. The progression that we have with pharmaceuticals, we need that. There are people that need that will exist, but there needs to be an appreciation where both can exist, and they both need to be taken into consideration for all medical conditions. I don't think we can treat everything the way we are, and I think we need more. And you obviously see that way more than I do, and which is why I just applaud you for what you're doing. I think it's
thank you.
I think it's amazing. I personally believe in psychedelics. I think everyone should go through some type of minor way to lose the ego that you're born with. We didn't choose to have it, but we don't have to wear it. And I think there's a way that you can dig into yourself to figure out how to shed that, because it's a wall that we put up. Our ego is a wall. And once we get out of that, we can create the community that I believe we should have. But it's hard to do that. It's hard for humans to do that. And we're getting there. I think we're getting there. So
I do notice that in like recreational spaces,
yeah,
there is this open-heartedness that I wasn't really finding in recreational spaces that were more alcohol infused.
yeah,
There's a reason. I mean, this is like the classic cliche example, but like you look at Burning Man,
yeah.
okay, and you look at right, I went there. You look at the different principles, right, that govern Burning Man. They've got,
Yeah,
radical self-expression, acceptance. There are many, right? But it's basically saying show up genuinely exactly as you are, and in return, we will accept you and show you love and show you open arms for exactly who you are. And you don't need to go to Burning Man to experience that. But there are a lot of psychedelics at Burning Man. That's just the way it is. And it's not a coincidence in my opinion that you have this like flow of these ideals and principles, and you have psychedelics. And it's not that you need a psychedelic to be an open-hearted person, but it's like once you experience that open-heartedness and the ego dissolution from a psychedelic, I feel like we might have a little bit more ease in replicating that in our everyday lives. And again, you don't need to experience a psychedelic to be that way. We don't need MDMA to love ourselves or be kind to others. But it's such a powerful experience that I think it infuses people's day-to-day in a very, very unique way. And then I can also relate that to like the dance and electronic dance music and
yeah,
rave scene.
yeah,
The whole reason, Paradise Garage in like New York City came together was to give a temple of solace and acceptance to marginalized communities with very, uplifting music for people to come together and just be
yeah,
and commune with each other and bond. And what just that music does to your brain is phenomenal. And then, of course, you have MDMA that entered these spaces. And I completely know that these can be high risk environments with a lot of potential for misuse and abuse, especially when you start mixing substances and you're not being careful and responsible. But I would love to, shed light on the other side of it, where like people are truly going there for a release and for true connection. And realizing, I guess, that like the line between therapy, like classic therapy, medical container, therapeutic container, is not so thick. um, but sorry, I totally lost my train of thought there. But essentially, the separation, the divide between therapy and recreation is not so large, is what I'm trying to say. They're kind of one and the same. You can go to a dance party and experience total bliss and euphoria and enjoyment, and that can be the reset that you needed.
yeah,
You might find that very therapeutic, and it could be a proper replacement for a therapy session
yeah.
in
Well,
certain cases.
well, definitely. And I think you use therapy to understand more pieces of yourself. And when you take these substances, rather than you discussing it with somebody, it kind of shows you that through your own like existence. At least how I
Yeah,
experienced my minors in psychedelics and MDMA. Um, it shows you something, and
for sure.
it's an experience that I think everyone should do. I think you should do it in a very safe and controlled setting for whatever that is for you. And there's ways to do it safely, like you said, which I think is great, especially with this microdosing. The more and more people that are into it, what that's accomplishing for them, I think's great. So one thing we just segued into is music, which I think you're also pretty involved in, but that also goes into neurons and firing the brain. What relationships have you found just personally with music and with what you do and appreciation? Because it all comes together, like science, creativity, music, arts, all of this is wrapped up. Um, And that's another outlet that I think you're into. So you want to shed a little more light on that?
Y- Yeah, yeah. I mean, on a personal level, I've always been into music and play instruments and sing and just deep appreciation for music. But I started a project with a good friend of mine. It's called Public Secret. It's a music label and an artist collective. And it always kind of just existed on the side of everything else that I was doing. But music and psychedelics and plant medicine go hand in hand in many ways. And so
Yeah.
I felt like the channels of communication between these two areas of my life kind of opened up. And it was only recently, I think in the past year, that I started to speak to the psychedelic journey and how music is way more than just, a playlist in the background.
Right.
And that kind of evolved into discussions and explorations about the neuroscience behind music and what is happening in the body and the brain when we listen to music, what is happening in the body and the brain when we listen to music and we're on psychedelics. Why do these
Yeah.
two things go hand in hand?
Yeah. Or
How
like
is music?
frisson. What is it, like frisson?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
how that happens. I get it all the time. It's remarkable.
yeah, yeah. So do
And for
I.
people that don't know what that is, if you've ever experienced, it could be more than music, but it happens to me with a lot. If you're listening to something and you get chills, or some type of what I found is some type of excitement that happens that you're stimulated and you get these goosebumps. And that's frisson from what I've frisson symptoms or something like that. Um,
Yeah, it's from a French word, which is frisson, which means goosebumps.
oh, there you go. Makes sense.
That's what that's what
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
And music does it.
Totally. Of course it does. And music on its own is psychedelic. So like psychedelic just means like mind manifesting and it's not really related to a substance. It's just that
Yeah.
substances can be psychedelic, but music, dancing, yoga, meditation, breath work can all be psychedelic. And I've I've recently begun to kind of explore these themes of like how the brain reacts to predictability and how predictable rhythms create entrainment. So your brain waves and body rhythms begin to sync with the music.
Okay.
This structure lowers the cognitive load and frees up a bandwidth for pleasure, for emotion, for movement. And then from like a neurological standpoint, you have this network in your brain that's called the default mode network. It's like your internal monologue. And people who have an overactive default mode network, I'm simplifying it here, but people who have an overactive DMN will have a lot of like mind chatter. They might be more anxious people. They might have a lot of like self-referential thinking, self-doubt. You see where I'm going?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
from a neurological standpoint, when you're dancing to music, listening to music, uh, you have a reduction in activity in the DMN. So like that internal monologue is going to quiet. You have increased dopamine release, especially in house music when
Yeah.
you have a drop, right?
Yeah.
So it's like tension is building, and then it resolves with a drop. And that's so satisfying. So you've got this dopamine release. That's like your reward, mechanism right there. So you're encouraged to keep listening, to stay in that vibe. Serotonin, oxytocin in social settings is always flowing at a higher level, and you might even enter a flow state without the use of any substance. So time kind of dissolves and you become fully embodied. So
Oh yeah.
repetitive music creates what we call predictive scaffolding, and house music or electronic dance music especially adds like these micro variations. So you've got like all of a sudden you're kind of stacking synths and subtle grooves and reverb. And so it's like gently violating those predictions. And then you get a loop, right? And so then your brain's like, oh, I know what's coming. I'm hearing this in like this repetitive
Yeah.
way, and I really like it.
Yeah.
So our brains are predictive machines, and we gravitate towards predictability, but we also gravitate towards novelty. So if you're listening to a loop and all of a sudden the loop breaks and what emerges is something really unique, that's also going to be really enticing. So I think that's like a large reason why people keep going back to these places and why house music is so popular. But you have these concept and phenomena with other genres as well. And recently, I feel like I've been able to kind of bridge these topics and offer. I do a lot of like talks and workshops, and people are interested in experiencing music and learning about the felt experience of neurological and like neuroscience but behind it. And so speaking about these topics has been really cool, because now I feel like I'm actually able to bridge like the neuroscience side with more of the music, arts, creative piece. And people are interested. I feel like people do want to know how the body works and what's going
Yeah.
on in there.
Oh, I
Yeah.
think it's one of the most interesting things that we have in this world is our brain. Well,
Yeah.
besides our soul, that's a bigger quest of to understand. But next to the soul, the most working thing we can dig into is the human brain. Not just the human brain, but all brains. But it's we're we're miracles in how we work and what we can do and what this brain can do. I mean, not to segment off, but the one guy, what is it, Joe Dispenza, like Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he gets into the power of your brain and healing your body and using your mental capacity to do those things. And I think it's nuts, but I've always had some type of wonder of how music can correlate and shape and have so much influence on our emotions or our everyday lives. Just tones that we hear have so much influence on our brain. So I'm curious. So it's really cool to hear and understand house music, and everybody's like vibing in there. So I imagine
Yeah.
even if you're not on something, like it's a placebo effect. Like that energy gets into us. We're sponges when it comes to that. And I've also learned like that has to be a certain BPM or certain like vibrations that really trigger that. But then you can also get into like sound healing. And we're doing these things with these crystals and all these different vibrations. Is there correlation in that? And have you dug into the sound healing side as well?
Um, I believe so. Everything has a frequency, right? And
Yeah.
so the belief here is that certain frequencies that resonate with certain parts of the body can be healing to the body. I think that's a corner of science that's still developing.
Yeah.
I will say that music on its own can be healing. Like you talked about the power of the mind and the mindset. If you've ever listened to a song and it's completely shifted your mood, like that's the concept, right
Yeah.
there. And going into a challenging situation, a stressful situation with a solid mindset, um, in a good mood, if you will, or just like coming from a place where you're elevated, can really change the outcome. We've studied it, I think, even in oncology, where the power of the mindset can really influence how a person progresses with the illness. And of course, there are limitations. If it's a very aggressive form, advanced form, or terminal form of cancer, you can have the greatest mindset in the world. Eventually, you might succumb to that cancer. However, there have been studies that shown that people have lived past their life expectancies just because they've had a very powerful mindset. And if music or anything in the arts can provide that, then incredible. It could also just induce an altered state. So if you're coming from a place where you're highly stressed, maybe you have insomnia, lying on a sound bed that has sound and vibration can do wonders
Yeah.
for people. And I think this is an area that's being studied to truly understand like what is actually happening to the body when we experience sound at these different frequencies, these different ways. Are there genres that are more likely to offer healing, or is it just someone's preference? You might resonate with classical music, someone might resonate with I don't know, yeah, electronic music,
Yeah.
and that subjective experience is really what's going to be a driver, and it's not so much the genre. But I've even seen ultrasound being studied and using sound waves for different things. And
Yeah.
yeah, science and the science of sound is an area that is being deeply explored.
Yeah.
And right, and it makes sense. I mean, since the beginning of time, the humans have banged on a drum,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. No, that's it. And we can you can project emotion so much through sound, and someone can
Hmm.
really capture what you're trying to create with that. But you see it throughout all religions and stuff, like communities getting together, doing chants, doing stuff around the fire. Like that's
Yeah.
not an uncommon thing. And they believed in the power of that community and the power of the sound or that vibration that that community then was able to project. So
Yeah.
it's interesting that that's lost and now it's coming back to be studied, like thinking like, oh, maybe there was something there. It's exciting. It's nice that we're breaking that ground again to
Totally.
understand it. Um, that's great. That's
Yeah, it
great.
creates an altered state. And at the end of the day, I think that's the altered state is what's actually healing and causing a ripple effect, um, changing the brain waves, um, going from beta waves to alpha waves to theta waves, which are like deep and slow. And if you're meditating, you're going to be in a theta state.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting. But like when you're dancing to music with other people, you actually have your brain waves that sync. So you can actually have alpha and theta at the same time, moving together, and that's producing an altered state of consciousness, one that you can access with hours of meditation, one that you
Yeah.
can access with psychedelics, one that you can access by listening or playing music. And I think that's the altered state is what we're after and what people are studying.
Yeah. And I've learned that it's also the cohesion between both hemispheres being able to turn down and then collide into one. But I've learned that we're so hemisphere driven individuals. And then to get into that pure meditative state, when it goes into like brain waves, it's when they both settle down and reach their
Mm-hmm.
cohesion. So it's interesting on what we have to take in to get us to that. And sound is a big contributor. Um, Wild. Wow. What a lot. What a great episode so far. We're reaching. I try to keep it at to an hour, so we're at it. You know, people are mostly home by now with their drive. I could go on for so much more with you, and I appreciate your
Same.
time. So we'll dig into just a quick wrapping questions. So favorite plant medicine right now?
Right now, um, ooh,
Oh yeah, I know this would be a sticker. You can give me a couple if you want.
yeah, I'll give you a couple because I'll give you a couple. Um, Blue Lotus,
Okay.
and that's legal, by the way.
Good. Let's do legal ones so maybe people
Yeah,
can dig into it, you know. They don't have to
yeah,
hit
yeah,
us
yeah.
come weird in our DMs. Hey man, where can I get this?
Where can I
So,
get my hands on this?
yeah. Yeah.
Blue Lotus. I'm half Egyptian and half Greek, and there's this long-standing, use of Blue Lotus in Egypt, in ancient Egypt, and I've always been very fascinated. I've also been like a very lucid, active dreamer
Okay.
since childhood, and Blue Lotus, creates this like state of deep relaxation. And it can also be a medicine or a plant that can really support lucid dreaming. So I've been digging
Really?
deep into Blue Lotus and teas and tinctures for a while now, and I think it's really cool.
What have you found
Uh,
better, tea or tincture?
uh, Tea.
Okay.
Recently, I've been enjoying a tea, but my most preferred is smoking Blue Lotus. That's
Okay.
my favorite.
So you can
Yeah,
smoke it? Okay.
yeah.
Sweet.
It's a flower, and you can just roll it like a joint.
Sweet.
Um, Pico Botanica is the brand that Pico Botanica.
Pico
Yeah, shout out.
Botanica. Shout out.
Shout out Pico. Shout out.
Pico.
I'm not paid by Pico Botanica, but
Me
I
neither.
do I do love
Yeah.
their product. Ritual oils is another one that I really enjoy as well. They have a Blue Lotus. I also really like Damiana, which is another flower. It's a lot of women, I think, love Damiana because
Okay.
it's if you mix a Blue Lotus, a Damiana, and some rose into like a little smoke, you've got yourself a little aphrodisiac joint right there.
Okay. Nice. Nice.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I'm trying to remember the brand where I get it. It's called Goddess Breath. and Mama de la Mico. We'll put these in the show
Yeah,
notes,
yeah,
but
yeah.
Mama de la Mico, she makes this Amora blend, and she has a really nice herbal blend with Damiana and Rose and Lotus and some other things. So I think that's what I'm enjoying right now. And I'm also in an exploration with Syrian rue, which is another ancient plant for lucid dreaming. So you can see a theme here.
You like the
All right,
lucid dreaming.
let's keep rapid firing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Song that you would prescribe for emotional release.
All right. Well, just because I was listening to him last night, Niels Fromm,
Okay.
electronic producer, pianist,
Okay.
blending piano and electronica. There's so many, but I was really getting into his stuff yesterday, so I'll just shout out Niels Fromm
Good. Good.
and anything really that he's made.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you big in electro? Is that like your main, would you say that's your main music component, or what do you
No,
get down with usually? Yeah.
the music label that I have is an electronic music. It's very like global groove
Cool.
electronic music, a lot of Afro, Latin,
Ooh,
Brazilian
nice.
influences. So
Cool.
that's why I say global groove. But I love soul. I love indie soul. Um,
I like
I love a lot
drums.
of
Good drums and bass. So
drums,
I grew up
drum and bass.
this is funny. I grew up breakdancing.
Oh,
So I
cool.
was in a crew. We did a bunch of stuff in Philly. So I grew up dancing, big into it, all different types. But I love just a good like jam sesh drum line, and you're just kind of grooving around rather
That's
than a
fun.
structured routine that you would
Okay,
have to
cool.
do. Uh, so yeah, when I
Cool.
heard like Afro beats, Brazilian stuff like that, I was like, oh yeah, that's
Yeah,
so
I love
sick.
that.
Yeah,
I love that.
good, good. Most underrated healing modality in your mind? Well, I guess we kind of talked about it. This is what we're talking about in a way. But
You know what?
you can skip it.
Acupuncture.
Yeah.
No, acupuncture. I don't think it's underrated, but I think that people might not be educated about acupuncture. I think a lot of people think it's very like fringe. I know not everyone. I'm sure a lot of people who listen to this podcast are like acupuncture is the shit, but many people think it's fringe or it's woo woo or it's not real or it's not like a real modality.
Yeah.
But it certainly is,
Yeah.
and I think it's very powerful. It's not just for aches and pains; it can regulate your entire nervous system. I've definitely experienced like going into an acupuncture session feeling very overwhelmed and stressed, and the minute the first needles went in, just that stress
Released.
just completely released and dissipated. I've also seen people have full emotional releases during an acupuncture session. Acupuncture paired with a sound bed too is really really powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe it's not underrated, but maybe people are not fully informed, and they should
I,
be.
I dig it. So on top of acupuncture, what do you think of myofascial release
Yeah,
and
myofascial
therapy?
release.
Yeah. Yeah. Sick.
Yeah, I was a long time Olympic weightlifter,
Nice.
CrossFitter.
Okay. Yeah.
And myofascial release was my rescue.
Yeah. Yeah. No, the more I dig into it, it's pretty cool. Just how fast the fascial system can break down the language in your body and what it builds up, and to get rid of it
Yeah,
is pretty important. So people, if you never heard of
yeah.
that, look it up. It's pretty sweet.
Yeah. Also, gua sha with the cupping. So
Yeah.
not just putting the cups on the body, but actually pulling it along the body to separate the fascia from the muscle. I think that's
Yeah.
really helpful.
Yeah. Nice. And how can people stay up to date with you? Your socials, what should they follow? What should they look into? And it's pretty much the ending segment we got.
Cool. Beyond Consulting life
Word.
is my company's website. My personal website is undergoing a revamp. So if you want to connect with me personally, you can send me a message on Instagram. So that's Steph with a PH, two underscores, and the letter K. So Steph K with two underscores. You can send me a message there. There's a lot of educational and fun content. If you're interested in collaborating on a project, whether you're a botanical or plant medicine brand or a clinic or retreat center, check out my website. You could also send me a message through the contact page there. It'll get to me, and I'm always open to have a chat about anything we talked about today. Yeah.
Awesome. I love it.
This episode is brought to you by Waddle, the world's fastest and easiest way to review and track your medicinal cannabis products. Waddle offers batch-specific reviews, so you'll know what to stash or what to trash. It's exclusively available for Pennsylvania medical cannabis patients. Waddle helps you take the guesswork out of your cannabis journey and ensures transparency with the verified product tracking. Download Waddle now on iOS or Android, that's WODL, and take control of your cannabis experience today.